To have Rick Weible here today. He is a dedicated election integrity advocate with a background in computer engineering and cybersecurity. A former mayor of St. Bonifacius. I'm a Jersey girl, so please excuse me. Minnesota, and current Elkton, South Dakota City Council member. He brings over 15 years of public service experience. As a founder of Midwest Swamp Watch, Rick has focused on exposing vulnerabilities in voting systems, notably presenting evidence of election software issues at county commission meetings. With a BA in political science from the University of Minnesota, go Gophers, he combines technical expertise with a commitment to transparent government. Rick has testified before South Dakota legislative committees, contributing to election security reforms, and speaks nationwide to educate citizens on safeguarding the electoral process. He is the former Minnesota CD3 chair and current CEO of D3 Defense and the founder of uscase.org. Let's have a warm welcome for Rick Weible.
So I'm not used to using a microphone, and I already know that this room is not acoustically great for me not to use a microphone, so I'm a very weak person, and if I start going like this, just remind me. No problem. I'm human. All right, so yes, I was born and raised in Minnesota, and it is true in 2018, we followed my son who moved and went to South Dakota State University. Go Jackrabbits. And we followed him out there in 2018 and became residents of South Dakota. What's funny is when my wife wanted me to move out there, she said, "We are moving so that you are done with politics. I want no more politics." We all know what happened with COVID. My wife gave me the stink eye and said, "Go get him." And I warned her that before moving to South Dakota was one of the most corrupt states. Solidified by last year's Supreme Court decision that basically said, oh yeah, you legislators, not a conflict of interest if you benefit from some of our state contracts. Go ahead and vote on those. Literally, that's what happened. So knowing that, and my wife allowed me to get involved, and then I see the dystopia of what happened in Minnesota in 2020, but actually I started a little bit before that because I kind of cheated a little bit. Old friend of mine, Andy Seelig, called me before the primary election in Minnesota and said, hey, there's a consent decree coming along, and we think it's going to be a problem. Send me your data, I'll take a look at it. So he sent me the data, looked at it, I do a write-up. Oh wow, don't worry about it, 60,000 homes without an apartment number, 20,000 homes without a leading number in the front of the address, and don't worry about all those college kids that may not be there anymore without even a dorm number that will just end up on the table. How did I know that? I asked my son because he worked in one of the dorms, and I'm like, hey, Michael, what happens to the mail that's not addressed to a unit number? Oh, we just throw it out on the table in the lobby. Oh. So that's what's going to happen with the ballots. Good to know. So I publish those results, give it to Minnesota Voter Alliance. Andy Seelig wins and prevents the a la carte mail-out ballots. That's the first victory of the 2020 election. So credit goes to Minnesota Voter Alliance and their long history of standing up for your rights. Then we see more activity across the United States as COVID surges. And now Perkins Coie comes out and gets active in all the different states to do a la carte mail-out ballots. Don't worry about signature verification, all the wonderful things that you got to experience here in the 2020 election. You were the first state impacted, and then the rest of the country falls like dominoes. Part of why I'm kind of revisiting this is you need to understand Minnesota is in the lead pole position for deciding how elections are run. Ask yourself, with so many Republican Secretary of States, how is it that Steve Simon is the president of the National Secretary of States Association? He has a role right there. And for a little research, you should ask yourself, why did Trump last month put out an executive order literally calling out Perkins Coie? So much joy. There will be more information about that over the next year. Yeah, there will be a lot of good stuff. Let's just say there's a few investigations that are opening. Perkins Coie, in case you don't know, is one of the leading law firms also interested in setting policy for cryptocurrency. Watch what they're doing. It will impact you. Not a conspiracy theory. You can Google it and you'll actually see the legislation they wrote. Okay? Be informed. One of the lines that I've been saying consistently throughout all of my speeches, transparency is the inoculation to conspiracy theories. Transparency is the inoculation to all conspiracy theories. I also believe that elections is the gateway to understand how the rest of your government is going to work. If your elections are transparent, or you don't have a good feeling about it, I bet you're not going to have a good feeling about the way that that county, school, governance is actually working and operating. So in Minnesota, we were actually ahead of Mike Lindell asking for cast vote records. Then when Lindell came out and announced it, it was shut down statewide. Then we have a Secretary of State of Minnesota who lies and says cast vote records aren't a thing in Minnesota. Well, the lie that he doesn't understand is that cast vote records, so you're looking at me already going, what the heck is a cast vote record? When you put your ballot into the tabulator, it takes a picture of the front and back of the ballot, and then it creates an interpretive file of how it interpreted that ballot for the tallying and counting of that ballot. Those two files together make up the cast vote record. So when Steve Simon says that's not a thing, head goes a little wild and kind of goes, really? Then how do your machines work? Because you claim that they're certified by the United States Election Assistance Commission based upon the 2005 standards. It's been a standard since 2005 when Minnesota adopted it to be so in state statute to require that all voting systems used in Minnesota would follow the voluntary voting system guidelines. You're asking, why is it voluntary? Because our Constitution says it's the state legislatures that set the time, place, and manner of the election. So just like a building code that an international organization sets out over here, the United States Election Assistance Commission, how many of you remember Gore v. Bush? The hanging chads. So the solution was more government, more funding, and let's create new standards. So since 2005, where we've been operating under these standards, we still have the same problems that we don't have visibility to the cast vote records of how these machines work. We've not audited the source code of these systems. We've not truly developed a good test deck to instill confidence in our elections. You're going to see some of that evidence here again in 2024. And what's funny is, as I've been here in 2020, 2021, 2022, talking with some of these counties, we've talked about this before. Why do you keep failing? Even in Carver County, we've talked about absentee ballot boards and making sure that there's party balance. It is the county jurisdiction that determines the makeup of those absentee ballot boards. In a conservative county, wink, wink, why don't they want a balanced absentee ballot board? I'll show you a little bit of that story too. So you can take a look at Midwest Swamp Watch. I've got a lot of other states on there too in some of the more tools area. I'll be having some additional updates from Minnesota as soon as the legislature is done, because I don't want to tip my hand to have the Democrats pass some last minute legislation that handcuffs our ability for the 2026 election. Okay? In short, I'm feral. I'm a wanderer. I have my own computer consulting business. I have so many great customers here in Minnesota and friends and family that are here that I still care about Minnesota. It was hard for me to leave Minnesota and go to South Dakota because I was born here, educated here, raised my son here. I thought I was going to die and be buried here. Until Minnesota really attacked our family and we had enough. And my wife wanted to be done with politics. But I still come back. And thank you for inviting me. My computer consulting company, I have folks in collections, I have banking customers, I have defense contractors, I have all sorts of experience because I'm too stupid to say no. I like a challenge. I like to try things. So, kind of starting in 2016, in my last year as mayor, Hennepin County was one of the test counties for the poll pads, no ink. We were the only city during that test of the 42 cities that said no. Main reason was your contract sucked. Right in the specific language it says, we don't guarantee the effectiveness, the accuracy, or the efficiency of the equipment. I told my council, I would not recommend you sign this, and I'm not going to sign it. I'm not going to vote for it or agree to it. And then the next meeting I hacked into the iPads because they weren't secure. Hennepin County had the audacity to send kind of a whitewash memo and ask for my help to help secure it. I said, no way, not interested. There's a video on my Midwest Swamp Watch site from D3 Defense where 2 years ago, I hack into a quote-unquote secure iPad and reboot it. Well, my partner Chris is scrolling on Amazon. So if I can reboot an iPad remotely, that means I have God controls and can do anything I want on that thing. So when Minnesota told you in 2020 that all of those were secure, but yet in 2022 and 23, I can still hack it, really? That's a lie. Then, after that, I started looking on the internet to find out more about these machines, and this is how secure they are. I could buy them at city, county, and state auction sites throughout the United States. So from 2017 through last year, I was able to purchase complete systems of Dominion, HART, and ES&S. It's a good thing I bought them because someone else could have used them for nefarious actions. It was great when the FBI knocked on my door and a couple of quote-unquote agencies from other states, AGs, wanted to find my receipts. No problem. Here you go. Oh, your state was one of the ones. You have no laws to prevent this. Oh, they shut up and walked away. So then the challenge was, who out there is an expert that we can rely on? Couldn't find one. And I was getting frustrated because I'm sitting there looking at the EAC documents and I'm seeing complete garbage by the United States Federal Election Assistance Commission that's supposed to be a bipartisan group that's supposed to have our backs and watch how the states are spending money on the election equipment. They have no audit authority and they have no legal authority to hold the states accountable other than we won't fund you next time. But they've yet to say no. So I wanted to learn more about the cast vote records, how that all worked. Could you hack into a system? So I started on the Dominion side because of Dakota County. Worked on that case for about a year and a half with the Dakota County team. And that was incredible to learn how vulnerable and how weak those systems were and the bad testing and the bad oversight that they had on the systems. We even got through our court case a letter from Andy Loken to the Secretary of State our secure router is no longer supported by Cisco, and you haven't approved a new system yet, what are we going to do for the 2020 election? They ran on a Windows 7 system where Microsoft didn't put out any patches after January 14th, 2020. Dominion and ES&S lied to all of the Secretaries of States and said, we have an extended contract with Microsoft and we will put out those security patches once Microsoft releases them. How do we know they lied? Because you can go directly to the United States Election Assistance Commission, and anytime a patch is issued, it has to be reviewed and approved by the EAC. Not a single engineering change order was requested by any vendor for security patches for the 2020 election. And history repeated itself again for the 2024 election. And here we are looking at the ads on all your Windows systems telling you that Windows 10 end of life is October 14th of this year. They're going to do it to us again. Maybe. And you'll see the stopgap. So here's our fun little slide. I should have went to that earlier. So in Minnesota, here's kind of the issues that we got to see in 2024. Absentee ballot boards. It was great that the Republican Party of Minnesota stepped up 2 weeks before the end of absentee balloting, missing the other 35 days where you needed to have balanced absentee ballot boards, but that was too little too late in Hennepin County, and then the rest of the counties were like, well, that was Hennepin County, that's not us. Yeah, it was, once the party sent out the memo to the other 86 counties. Then Edina, you guys have the wonderful picture of the ballots in the back of the minivan. All sorts of great stories about that. Oh, it's secure. It's in the wide open. One of the boxes doesn't even have a security seal. Guard the ballots, that was a program started by Susan Sjogren Smith looking at the state statutes. There's a concern there that they may eliminate that this year or next year to prevent you guys from doing that. Oh, by the way, they broke the law. The ballots in 19 counties were available on the Secretary of State site. Sample was not written on them and all the timing marks were there. So you could have printed out the ballots and injected them into the election. Logic and accuracy tests were complete crap in the state. I've yet to find one that actually is done correctly. Corrupt voter rolls. I'll show you an example of my hairstylist on Saturday who cut my hair, and you'll see her record. And modems were used. And to top it all off, one of the jurisdictions actually violated federal law by throwing away 20 ballots. I mean, I can't make that stuff up. This is the Supreme Court. Minnesota had to agree with the Republican Party to say the law is what it is and party balance should be there. And especially when it was so obvious when Hennepin County was given the list and they didn't pick one? Really? So blatant. And so we have to go after these Democrats all the time, and you wanted the evidence. Why does this matter? Why do we allow city workers and county workers to be election judges on the absentee ballot boards? We already know they pay union dues, right? Oh, this is public information. Their union dues, AFSCME, outfund the Democrat Party, outfund the Republican Party and give all their money to the Democrats. So what we should be doing is challenging them to go, do you pay union dues? Okay, we're going to put you down as a Democrat. We need a Republican here. And we should accuse them of that openly by presenting them their own information to basically say, look, your money $400,000 went to the DFL House Caucus, another $400,000 went to the Senate DFL Caucus, and in subsequent years, in 2022, your money, $1.8 million, went to the DFL House Caucus, Senate Caucus, and the DFL State Central Committee. You couldn't fumble on any Republican? It all went to one side. You have to be bold and say, enough of this. So this is why I'm so thankful that SD50 is having me, that you, as a party unit, should go after every single level and say, we need to be represented. And if you don't use our election judges and our absentee ballot judges, we will sue you again. You can't allow this. This is why this allows the gateway of fraud in the elections in Minnesota. They think it's a joke. How many of you were aware of this? Raise your hands. Okay, good. How many of you were at some of my previous speeches? Yeah, exactly. I originally showed this in Carver County. And this was the great picture from your website of the, great election security. And what I loved when I looked at these is you can see the blue and the red tabs. Yep. First concern there is lack of consistency. So how would that happen? The major concern is that this little box here has no tab on it whatsoever. So was that tampered with? I have all sorts of questions. Where is the other person? How did this get here? Why is it wide open to the public? Is the person actually handicapped and legitimate to park there? No. Because I can see the handicap sign just peeking above the roof of that van. Just seeing that like that is inexcusable. They need to develop a better process, and I hope that SD50 will sit down with them and say, we are going to develop a better process, because this will never ever happen again.
We did speak with both city clerks.
Yep.
And they did make some changes. The person who took the picture is actually here. I don't know if he wants to be told or not. Grant Johnson.
Thank you, Grant.
The city clerk did not like the attention that this brought to them. Very angry with us for bringing it to the public.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
And
Why is that your problem?
yeah.
It was in public view, in a public area.
And FYI, we did a FOIA request for the city of Bloomington information as well, and review of their cameras. Their property showed that the same thing happened at the Bloomington City Hall.
So they're consistent?
Yes. And they had a pilot program to process all of the absentee ballots down in Hennepin County. So counties could opt in or opt out of it.
Cities could opt in out. Yep.
Cities could, sorry. And basically, they were all transported by this courier, one person, down to Hennepin County. And by the way, one of our constituents, after that lawsuit, was selected for that absentee ballot board as a Republican. They were escorted in and out of the building. They were only allowed to look at about, I think, 22 ballots, right, during the day. She continually asked to see where the ballots were actually being processed and opened and put through the counting machine. They would not allow her. She went to Human Resources and said, look, I'm on the ballot board. Can I see where they're processed? And no, it would not allow it. So even though she got on the board, the only thing she did was verify the signatures on 22 ballots.
over in 3 days.
This is why it's so important to share these stories, because the public doesn't understand this. They don't even know it. They don't realize the unions are running the elections. You know, and people ask me, well, does it really matter? Yeah. We look at the state budgets, you look at the federal budgets, you look at the city budgets, you look at the county budgets, you look at the school board budgets. We're talking trillions of dollars. That's the incentive. Trillions of dollars. That's why they do it. Don't rob a bank. Go get the ballots. We went on so right before the election, I went and viewed the Secretary of State's website because we were concerned about a couple of counties and what we were seeing there. Drop boxes up in St. Cloud, Rochester. And so I went in, started putting in some of the addresses, and lo and behold, I find out that 19 counties violated this statute. It became part of a case regarding 14B that is still working its way through the courts. So Matt Benda is the attorney for that case. And these timing marks are real. I've already proven that I can buy the ballots here in Minnesota and I can just go ahead and print my own ballots. And with unsecured drop boxes, where Republicans aren't able to verify whether or not the ballots are in official envelopes, signatures, chain of custody, that itself is ripe for fraud. I didn't just do it once, I did it twice. I did it in 2023 and 2024. 10,000 ballots in 2023 and 5,000 in 2024. Then in part of vindicating Trump, I had my friend Ezra order ES&S ballots from the state of Michigan, and they dropped it right off and delivered it right to his house in California. Don't worry, we just repeated the exercises last week, and I was able to pick up another 10,000 ballots in Minnesota, and we were able to pick up another 5,000 ballots out of Michigan, North Carolina, Florida, Texas, California. They still haven't secured it. Also, when it comes to testing, Minnesota's failing. But don't worry, I decided to go to another state last year just to get rid of my own bias. I went to Wyoming, 23 counties, a little easier, right? Don't worry, during the presidential primary of 2024, all 23 counties violated their state statutes. And the reason I picked Wyoming is because the violation is a felony. And the other beautiful thing, there's no statute of limitations. But here's the disappointing piece. We started a case in Laramie County. Depositions, for my deposition was in March, and then the county clerk just happened last week. So that started in August, and we're still all the way here in April, and we couldn't protect the general election with her violations. And how do we, and if you want evidence of this, you can go to the Wyoming Secretary of State's website. We worked with Chuck Gray. He issued a letter to all of the county clerks ordering them to redo their test decks for the spring, or sorry, for the primary election in Wyoming. So that was the first time that we were able to get evidence on a statewide basis that since 2005, these election officials don't know how to use the systems. The standards haven't changed, the instructions haven't changed, the requirements haven't changed, and we went into the 2024 election with these failures. Doesn't that make you sick? So in the ES&S world, 78 counties in Minnesota use ES&S. 78. The 9 other counties, 6 of them use Dominion and 3 use HART. Okay. Hennepin County is an ES&S house. The 2 types of ballots that are standard is the standard ballot that you're used to filling out with the ovals. The second ballot that may be used is from the express vote machine for disability users, where they use the touchscreen, the sip and puff device, the joystick, etc. to help them vote. So it doesn't fill out the ovals, it lists the candidates that they voted for and then it assigns them a barcode at the top. Okay? That's 2 different ballot styles. Ovals are different than barcodes, right? This I saw across the entire state of Minnesota. So if I see a DS200 tape from a test and I see that Donald Trump only got 1 vote, immediately I know to ask, what ballot style didn't you test? Minimum, he should have 2. And if you're doing the default ES&S test deck, which would be 1 to max, so that'd be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? So I see that here, 1, 2, 3, 4, oh shoot. Which ballot style didn't you test? Did you test the express vote and ignore the ovals, or did you test the ovals and ignore the express vote? Minnesota has no penalty for this type of corruption, and they can get away with it. There's no misdemeanor, there's no felony charge for this whatsoever. However, this is important for candidates. This is important for parties. The party and the candidates need to have a new position for every election, and that person needs to investigate these test decks. They need to show up on the public accuracy test, look at these tapes right away, and if they see a 1, you look at that election official and go, which ballot style didn't you test? There should be a minimum of 2.
In Hennepin County, I've been an election judge for a long time. In Hennepin County, we only use the roll. And the machine that marks the ballots for the hearing impaired or visually impaired,
Yep.
or I should say visually impaired, that marks a regular ballot.
So if that's happening in some of the jurisdictions, that's true, that they can get away with just the 1 test, but I don't recommend that because the laser printed oval is different than a pen marked oval. Because it will completely fill in the oval, whereas humans don't all the time. And that sensitivity is important. I'll give you an example. How many of you have ever used a blue pen in an election filling out a ballot? Raise your hands. Stop doing that. I just did testimony in front of the South Dakota legislature where I took one of our DS200s that we had purchased, and I did a comparison of black pens and blue pens. 70% of the time, the blue pen ovals were not red when the circles were not filled in above 70%. It would actually lose them. And what's incredible is I present this information to the Secretary of State and the State Board of Elections, they kick it, then I bring it to the legislature, I get it passed in one chamber, but the other chamber kills the bill. So they're allowed to use any type of ballpoint. And now imagine if you have a nefarious election official that wants to hand out blue pens and hope for the percentages that a number of those ballots won't be read, especially in a conservative district or a Democrat district. This is why ES&S only sells a black pen. They even tell you in their manuals they recommend black pens. The other thing that the ES&S manual also tells you, there's no grayscale. It's just black and white when it scans it. So that's why the blue pens drop off.
I bet the Senate districts could do some social media posts about that. So those of you from different Senate districts, think about that.
Yeah, and especially people who are doing absentee ballots at home, the risk that they're creating for themselves. Then comes one of my favorite races, 54A. 14 vote difference, and they admit to throwing away 20 ballots. But that's not all. We had new evidence the night before they were going to go to court, because I had gotten some of the voter rolls, and we knew that Scott County had completed their voter histories on 12/6, December 6th, okay? That's important to know when we look at the data itself. We then, on December 8th, the data that we get show 29 duplicates. Oh, it wasn't just about the 20 ballots you chucked. We got 29 duplicates here. That's a problem. Now remember, they said they were done the 6th. So then, once we release the information, oh, they go back and they clean that up and whitewash it. They were, Pam Altendorf, Representative Pam Altendorf, and Tom Murphy were running point on that election to get to the bottom of it and try to get the data. They stonewalled both of them. They wouldn't give them the daily absentee. They wouldn't get them the precinct logbooks. They wouldn't get them anything. The Democrats didn't want to lose control of the legislature. So this whole thing that was happening with the 2 weeks of not showing up, this was part of that. Now comes the fun part. Everything just changed. But Trump's going to need your help. Trump's executive order that came out on March 25th creates some deadlines that we're going to have to make sure that we are aware of. Enforcing citizenship requirement for federal elections. Within 30 days of the date of this order, the Election Assistance Commission shall take appropriate action to require in its national mail voter registration form issued under U.S. Code 52, and that also then falls in to the states as well. So any federal election, which happens every 2 years because of Congress, we have to make sure that all of the states are in compliance. Then on top of this, the Secretary of Homeland Security, oh great, so sorry. She had her purse stolen, $3,000 lost, her ID and her driver's license and blank checks and passport, right? Man, I hope we can do better. All right, so she is supposed to verify all of the voter rolls for the United States to make sure that all of those registered voters that voted in past elections are valid. Exactly. The question is, how is she going to do that? Well, actually, she should be able to do that because under the scenes of all of these voter registration databases are supposed to be social security numbers. It might be just the last 4 digits. Driver's license numbers. And with the Real ID Act, which Minnesota was one of the latecomers, but not as late as South Dakota and some of the other states, you guys have a rich enough cross database that she can go look at her database and look at the citizenship status. However, we've learned in South Dakota, even though it's supposed to be the county auditor or county clerk that's supposed to have ultimate authority for the voter rolls of their county, We discovered this little nugget in talking with America's favorite auditor, Leah Anderson, that we helped get elected in 2022. They actually don't have access to the original source documents that when 75% of registered voters are coming in is the DMV. No, most of these clerks don't have access to the records that the DMV takes pictures of.
Now, is that due to a data privacy issue?
No. It's due to funding and other weird things in South Dakota. So the Secretary of State has access, but she's not giving it to the county auditors.
Is that the case for every state?
We have to investigate, so we don't know. But finding this out in South Dakota raises an alarm that since 1993, when the motor voter bill was passed to require that when you get a driver's license, you're automatically registered, the very fact that we have this dystopian connection in South Dakota raises a red flag of what the heck are the other 50 states doing? Especially if it's the county official that's supposed to have authority to determine who's qualified and who's not. Secretary of States are not qualified to determine who is a qualified voter or not. So this is part, and so what's interesting, how many of you like what Doge has been doing? Oh good, because you're lucky. Doge is going to be looking at this stuff too, as part of the executive order. And I already know that there's going to be some issues. I'm kind of having fun. Then also another deadline within 90 days of this executive order, the Secretary of Homeland Security shall provide to the Attorney General, you know what that means, prosecution. So she's going to give the list of the ineligible voters and also what happened to these systems to allow this to happen. So there will be an accountability factor here.
This was like March 25th.
March 25th. The other big one is the Commissioner of Social Security has a role in this. Find all the dead ones, find all the illegals, find all the green cards. So this is pretty well written to where they've got to go through and clean all of this stuff up. This really was a two-pronged system. And there is another prong coming up in here as well. And the Attorney General has to take appropriate action with respect to states that fail to comply with the list maintenance requirements, which I've already got some evidence of Minnesota that you'll see here. So I'll be watching this.
What is this AO number? Do you know?
Do executive order elections, and it'll pop right up to the March 25th. You notice I got a haircut here recently. It's great when you can confide in your barber. Matea Molenkamp. What a great unique name. At least it's not like Jane Johnson, right? She's like, yeah, I voted in the 2024 election in South Dakota, and my parents called me and said that I got a mail-in ballot in Pipestone in my house. Well, let me go look. I have the February voter rolls from Minnesota. Let me see if you're still registered. Yep. She is. Because she talked about how she voted in the 2020 election in Minnesota, and then she voted in the 2024 election in South Dakota. So this is the January voter roll in South Dakota, and this is the February voter roll in Minnesota. So even though in South Dakota what's supposed to happen is when you get a driver's license, you check the box to notify your previous state that you want to be removed. She did that.
So what is the protocol for the state of Minnesota to take that information and act upon it?
So what's supposed to happen is that this goes to the county office gets that little card of removal, and then she's supposed to remove. There's a secondary check too. She even filled out a move of address with the US Postal Service. So the national change of address, she's on there. And they didn't take action, so that's 2 strikes.
So some years ago I moved from Dakota County to Hennepin County.
Yep.
And it took 3 attempts for me to get registered as a voter. And I was doing it in person at the Hennepin County Service Center in Edina, that I used to be with the library.
Sure, yeah.
And I'm absolutely convinced it was because I wasn't a person of color.
You're white, that's a color.
No, it's not.
All right, so, and don't worry, Minnesota had some dystopian stuff. They made sure that the registered voters that were from Minneapolis coming down into Bloomington at the hotels during the 2020 election, they were immediately registered.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So now we get this one here where the Election Assistance Commission now has to oversee NVRA of 1993 and look at defunding them and not giving them additional funding for their voter registration systems, and potentially calling back some of that money if they said in their application that they were going to do voter list maintenance and they didn't. This creates the hook to go after them. Oh, this is, and then this one here is kind of my baby. Remember when I talked about the voluntary voting system guidelines, the one that came out in 2005? That's 1.0. There was another one that kind of came out recently that was 1.1. Because they allowed 1.0 and 1.1 to coexist, and 1.1 was more stringent, all the vendors said, we'll just stay over here on 1.0. We're comfortable with that. We don't need the extra security. You're going to certify us, and you're not going to expire any of the previous systems, so we're good. And that's what they did for 6 years. But then, in 2021, they started working on the 2.0, get it passed, and officially live in 2023. Now President Trump is like, oh yeah, we're going to make that the new requirement, and we want you to expire all the systems that were on the 1.0 systems, the 1.0 certification. That means Minnesota is at 100% risk of decertification of all their systems because there isn't a certified system at 2.0 that Minnesota runs.
Can they be upgraded?
That's the question. Yes and no. So Leah Anderson out of Minnehaha County, we also run ES&S in South Dakota. I asked her, go find out from ES&S if you can buy additional DS200s, because they're all certified under the 1.0. The answer that we got back is, no, we're no longer selling DS200s. Uh-oh. You have to buy the new DS300s. So it tells me from a strategic move, ES&S is not going to certify the DS200s that you guys use in the precincts. They're going to require the counties to go to the DS300s to use in the precincts if they're going to force the 2.0 requirement.
At whose expense? Because there isn't a bill in the legislature.
Correct.
To purchase.
And that's part of the...
This is a budget year, and the Democrats have blown through all of our resources.
You're exactly right. My state has already adjourned its legislature. There are some legislatures that only meet once a year, out of every other year. So we've got a few states here that are kind of in the rears. And federally, normally under the security grant, there would be $55 million allocated to the states. During the last continuing resolution, they cut it down to $15 million. So there's even less money. So unless there is an additional federal funding for the EAC to create additional HAVA dollars, that would be the separate bucket. There's HAVA and the election security grants. So the $55 million has already been cut to 15. There is not a HAVA grant yet. And I look at my own legislature for next year, and the timing doesn't work. So if I look at my legislature starting to meet in January, it adjourns March 15th. I have a primary election in June. I have to have ballots already developed in May, April 1. And so I've got that narrow window between the end of the legislative session, so I've got 30 days to pick a vendor, have the money, get the contract signed, get the systems upgraded, print the ballots, test the ballots, and start my election. Yeah, not happening.
Really? Wow, jeez.
And by the way, that deadline is 180 days from the executive order, which is September 21st. We'll get our first glimpse as to the path. How many special sessions are going to have to be called in the 50 states that are willing to deal with this, with so many parties at odds with each other? This tells me that there's going to have to be a federal subsidy to make this work. Or this is the linchpin to force you to hand count.
Yes.
My precinct.
Go ahead.
Do you think, Rick, states will figure out how expensive the tabulators are when they don't have free money to buy them?
Well, they always have free money, and that's you, the taxpayer. We've learned that time and time again.
But at least they're not going to get money coming in that's not in their budget. It just comes.
Correct. And you're exactly right, because during 2020, 2021, and 2022, there was all this money from the federal government to inject into the states for COVID and for all of the aftermath of that. And now they're drunk on this, and now we have these elevated budgets at all these different levels of government that they haven't retreated back to, I'll say, 2018 levels.
Yeah.
And so that becomes a real issue here. And so when we see down here to rescind all previous certifications of voting equipment based on prior standards, that's a big deal. That's 100% of systems right now. And so how many vendors are going to be able to have election equipment right now that will qualify for the 2.0 standard? Not many of them. And what's really sick is that we can actually take a preview here to see where we're at right now. Right now, there are no systems certified under 2.0. So even if your state could do the budget, there's nothing to apply for because there's no system that you can price out because there's no vendor that has crossed the finish line yet. So then let's take another look. Let's take another preview. By the way, I took these pictures today. These are the voting systems under test. Who's missing on here? Oh yeah, ES&S and Dominion aren't on the list, but your 3 counties that are using HART could pass the finish line. So 75 counties, or 85 counties, or 84 counties have no idea what to do. They're in a lurch. So when you have 87 counties and 3 of them using it, HART has one system that they're putting in. Doesn't that just break your heart? This is terrible. We are walking into a disaster.
Why is it that they're so behind? ES&S and Dominion. This is beginning to smell to me like it's not an accident.
I'm going to say you're right, it's not an accident. I think this exposes the election companies, the vendors, for what they really are. They're not good companies. And we know that from looking at prior experience of how often were they updating the Windows patches, the antivirus. So in this election that we just had in South Dakota, Leah Anderson was handcuffed to run an election with antivirus that was from 2019. And here's what's sick. The election officials in South Dakota and many of these other states use their county machines to log into the ES&S portal, download the election definitions onto a thumb drive using their county machine, who knows what infection that has, then take that thumb drive and duplicate it and put it into all of the DS200s and the express vote systems.
Before scanning.
Yep.
So the other part is, what this reminds me of is another relatively well-known software company that's notorious for forcing people to do forklift upgrades, and that's Epic.
Yep.
In the healthcare space. It's exactly what Epic does.
Yeah.
They've exactly picked up that business model, which is notorious.
Yeah. And this, we need to be looking at this and talking about this and preparing. You know, because here's the Minnesota election code that requires the EAC certification. So examination of new voting systems. And so a voting system must be certified by an independent testing authority accredited by the EAC. So that means this executive order forces Minnesota at the end of the 180 days to be compliant with 2.0. That's where you stand right now. Unless the legislature decides to change this and do what Wisconsin does, which is they go completely feral and do whatever they want. And so the 1.1 passed in 2015, 2.0 passed in 2021, but became effective in 2023. And so what we can look at here is, okay, so if this became effective in 2023, we went through all of 2024, as you point out, with not even an application from Dominion or ES&S? Seriously?
Wow.
Especially when we already talked about Windows 10 sunsetting. How bad are they? Now we know they're really bad. But don't worry, let's bring it down to a state level. Here in Minnesota, you have extra flavors of voting systems because the Secretary of State and the vendors can go wink wink. I got a new system for you that wasn't certified by the EAC, but you can go through the test lab and they'll give you a certification. So 6060 is certified by the EAC. 6070 is certified by the test lab, not the EAC, and that's where you get your modems. But don't worry, the Secretary of State has your back and lets you know this certification does not cover or address any modeming functions that may be related to EVS 6070. So you didn't test it, you're not securing it, and you're just passing the buck to allow us to use this against state law, which says no modems can be used in an election. So don't worry, their actual testing document that's available online as well reiterates subsection 3.5, modem function not included in the certification. Source document, official documents, sosminnesota.gov.
Is there anything that can be done about that?
Yes, thank you for asking. And actually, we've been working on this. Boy, I think I have you on my payroll. Cinco de Mayo, we did not plan this. I can't believe it's scheduled for Cinco de Mayo.
So it doesn't hit the news.
Right. Matt Benda's case that started in 2022 in Rice County, 9 a.m. The first oral arguments will be heard. Please be there, spread the word. We need as many people there as possible so that the justices understand that people are interested in this. So if I was a hacker, which I am, here's a little knowledge thing for you. I noticed that Minnesota, when they test their voting equipment, they actually do a test run of the modems to the counties and then also test data from the counties to the Secretary of State's office. So if I wanted to inject code, I could inject it during the testing phase, and then when they do the actual election and the modems are wide open again, I can remove my code. And you wouldn't know. How do I know this? Because there was a test done in Wisconsin in 2018, and their Secretary of State actually discloses that their modems actually don't do acknowledgement tests to validate that every packet made it across. So that tells me I can just go ahead and inject the packets I want. I've done that for people, for testing. So I know it's possible. All of you may not know what I did in Brookings. Have you guys seen the video? Are you aware of the video that I hacked an ES&S laptop live in front of my county commissioners in under 5 minutes? Okay. I'm the only person that's done that in the United States where it's not a controlled environment. I don't control the video, I don't control the audio, I don't control the environment. I sat down, did it right in front of them. No edits. So I've already proved to you that I can hack the paper, print the ballots, alter the modems, hack an ES&S laptop, buy the equipment, and by the way, we also did accomplish another feat. We swapped out a DS200 and the county doesn't know we did it. And they report their serial numbers to their Secretary of State. Nobody's caught on. We know. The other thing that I'm so excited about is they're supposed to review the security of this. This is what's crazy. Since 2005, there's actually in the voluntary voting system guidelines 7.4.2, this is the requirement. Protection against malicious software voting systems shall deploy protection against the many forms of threats to which they may be exposed, such as file and macroviruses, worms, Trojan horses, and logic bombs. Vendors shall develop and document the procedures to be followed to ensure that such protection is maintained in a current status. Just like I have disclosed to you, I don't know about you, but I don't like 5-year-old expired milk. But that's what we ran in South Dakota. Don't worry, your state was about 3 to 4 years expired milk on your voting systems.
Are there any requirements to checking for old vulnerabilities? There's been a lot of issues with software as a service vendors just recycling code that's dating back as long as 2010 with vulnerabilities dating back to, I mean, it's just crazy.
I'm going to say no, it's not well vetted out. And this is where the voluntary voting system guidelines of 1.0 fails that. However, in some states, that opportunity is available. We're hoping to do that here soon.
That's starting to grow across many industries.
Correct.
Yeah, because that's what they mean.
So your antivirus level, Windows Defender, not applicable, they don't implement it. But the last patch was Windows 10 in 2021 for your ES&S equipment here in this state. So you were 3 years out of date.
Actually coming up on 4.
Yeah, but when you ran the election in 2024. So this is what your system wasn't aware of. All of this stuff. That's sickening, isn't it? So knowing that, especially when this stuff is public, just like you're pointing out, if I know that your Windows system hasn't been updated in 2021, I can go to the Microsoft CVE site and I can actually look at all the vulnerabilities and open it up like a restaurant menu and go, oh, I can go attack their system based upon this little program. Oh, I could do that. So what can we do? We have to train and recruit election judges and poll watchers, absentee ballot board members. We have to attend the public tests and ask for the logic and accuracy test reports. We have to review the sample ballots that are online to make sure that they don't have the timing marks around there so that they wouldn't be used in election equipment. We have to learn how to do hand counting because what if Trump is successful in getting rid of all the systems? We need to canvass our area to validate voters and sign up new voters. And we also have to establish trust in our elections again and trust in ourselves and our neighbors to say, we need your vote. How many of you know somebody who didn't vote in the 2024 election? Isn't that sad? And why is it? Is it because they don't trust the elections? They don't trust the politicians? It's all of it. So we have to do a better job of candidates. We have to do a better job as a grassroots organization, as part of the Republican Party. No matter what happens at the top level of the party, it's this local level that matters. You're the ground game, and everything that you do actually helps your chair or hurts your chair. But in the end, the people in this room who are part of your BPOU, that's what really matters. The talking with the county commissioners, the talking with the city managers as well, creating that relationship. What's interesting is if you go look at the Democrats party website, since 2020, they have this person that is called the county liaison. The county liaison's responsibility is to establish a relationship with the county election official to know what all the dates are and help them recruit people that they need for employment. The fact that we don't do that or review what the Democrats are doing is shameful. They're out there publicly stating exactly what they're doing. That's successful. We should mimic some of that and make sure we are creating that balance.
And some of those people that are being hired
Right.
are certainly from the DFL side.
Yep, exactly. And so,
What about the voter rolls? I mean, they need to be purged.
oh, correct. And so Trump has that in his executive order, and so all of these different
But
audits.
the states are fighting. I mean, what, Ellison's going to fight another lawsuit against that deal. I mean,
And he'll lose, because with some of the evidence that I'm already gathering, other data people here in the state are gathering. I'm pointing to Greg Buck because part of his team is also evaluating the voter rolls through their organization, Minnesota Voter Alliances as well. We've got two sets of databases with Doan Baber out of Carver County, who works with me at Midwest Swamp Watch. And we are creating these reports, and we're also analyzing. So now that this executive order has come out, we know the 30 and the 90-day deadlines. As soon as those deadlines hit, we will reevaluate the voter rolls, and if we see the same issues, we can file a case because of the non-compliance, especially when we see that there's a report for non-compliance that has to go to the Attorney General. We can add an addendum to that complaint.
So how do the executive orders fit in with the constitutional requirement that states administer elections? So the conflict or?
Yeah, so I'm glad you asked that question because I've been conflicted here for a while. So we have to kind of rewind just a little bit to the 1960s. But maybe we should rewind a little bit further to Reconstruction. So we have a 14th Amendment there that basically kind of said, oh, yeah, all you slaves are now U.S. citizens and you have a right to a federal ballot. I'm not going to address the state ballot. And so we kind of addressed this in South Dakota because we kind of had a reverse issue that happened. Each state can define who their citizens are and what the requirements are for citizenship and the ability to vote. Except in a presidential election, if you are a member of the Federal Individual Society and you happen to be in a state like Minnesota, which has a 20-day residency requirement, you can show up on election day, register to vote on a federal-only ballot. You won't get the full ballot, but you can get the federal-only ballot. Oh, by the way, most of your election officials violate that law. They just hand them a full ballot. On the absentee side, they are sending them a federal-only ballot. And we know this based upon the counts on the Minnesota Secretary of State's website that identify how many regular ballots, federal ballots, and then presidential-only ballots that are out there. And the numbers don't make sense, especially when you start looking at the colleges. All right, so then, getting back to the civil rights movement. Sorry. What we find out is that Congress passes a law that basically says you are going to allow minorities to vote. You're not going to exclude them from their voting rights. And then we also see, oh, thank you. We also see that they do redistricting. They get rid of the poll tax, they get rid of all of these things. So then we see that the federal government is usurping the 10th Amendment on states' rights, and that's what the states argue. We should be able to, under the Constitution, determine the time, place, and manner of the elections. But the federal government says, yeah, but not the voters. You don't get to destroy voter rights. So now we have this weird kind of head-to-head fight. Voting systems versus voting rights. So now with the executive order, you can kind of see that they are trying to protect federal voting rights, is the way that they're arguing it. Are they a US citizen? And for federal elections. That executive order is so narrow, states could do optional ballots where they say, here's your federal ballot and here's your state ballot, and then have two different classifications. South Dakota is the first state that now entered into that arena. I wrote 46 bills for the legislature to consider. 5 of them were signed by the governor. One of them, we established a federal-only ballot that is for President, Senate, and US Congress. Then, because we have these issues of fake people that supposedly live in South Dakota, they're RVers or they're tax avoiders. So for example, at one address, there are 15,000 registered voters. In a town in Emery, South Dakota, where there's 465 people, there is a county commissioner that runs a mail forwarding company, has 1,400 registered voters at his house. He wins every election. So then what we decided to do is we created that federal ballot first. We then designated that if you're using a mail forwarding company without a prior residential address in South Dakota, you get a federal ballot only and you no longer get to vote in our local elections. So now we create the distinction. And it was important to do that because we were unaware of another legislator coming in that was taking all of our elections and consolidating them. We didn't realize that he was going to have a bill that would take the school districts and the township elections and make them part of our primary and general elections. No more off-year elections. So in an effort to increase voter turnout for school board and city elections, they wanted to combine it. So it's a good thing we did, because in our statutes it would have created a little bit of confusion, because in school board and city elections, it is illegal for non-residents who actually live in the precinct. If they don't live there, they can't vote in those elections. Right. So luckily now we've clarified that. We've already had inklings of the ACLU wanting to come sue us for the bill we passed, and I wrote them a nice letter. We welcome your lawsuit, and if you want to go to the 14th Amendment level, we're okay with that for federal ballots. But we went above and beyond to give them both the Senate and Congress. If you want to exclude these mail forwarding companies to just presidential, we're okay with that. We'll stay tuned to see what happens. So we're kind of in the forefront of this as South Dakota to see what's going to happen in this. We're going to be one of the states that's going to be flagged for this. Alabama is another interesting state. They're the only state that allows a voter to challenge another voter to start an investigation as to whether or not that voter lives there. It can be turned into the sheriff or the county clerk for them to determine whether or not voter is a registered voter within that precinct. We started copying that into our legislation and got that kind of passed. We also passed U.S. citizenship, and I worked on the bill in Wyoming. Chuck Gray got it passed before South Dakota, but I used him as pressure to pressure our Senate to get it passed in our chambers. So that worked out, so I got a 2-for-1 deal out of that. Then, all of the other bills that we wanted to do for getting rid of the machines, in committee, it was a 4-5 vote. It just failed by 1 vote to get rid of the tabulators and go to hand count. But the fact that it was that close says that we're on the precipice of a talking point. Other things that you can do. So we've been successful in South Dakota. We've learned a lot. I have no better partner than Jessica Palmea, who heads South Dakota Canvassing. How many of you have heard of Jessica Palmea on Mike Lindell, some of the other interviews out there? I'm trying to recruit her to run for Secretary of State, and then I might be her deputy. That would put us in a pole position to help the rest of the United States to end some of this malaise that's going on out there. But it's going to be a hard fight to do that. She's very scared. How many of you have ever run for public office? Raise your hand. Okay. I'm going to tell you right now, we need more of you to run for office. Jessica had this discussion where she's just like, I want to return back to my normal life. And I said, are you serious? That's over. It took us decades to get to this point. Why do you think you can just go over to a wall and flip a light switch and everything's going to be A-okay again? It's not the way it works. And with everything that you've learned and accomplished, Jessica, you created South Dakota Canvassing. You studied like no one else did. You investigated B-Pro. You investigated the finances of ES&S. We worked together to get Leah Anderson elected into a valid position so that we could get the evidence that we needed from an elected official who has authorization to investigate her systems. So we've already tried legal. We've tried legislative. Now it's time to take seize control of an executive position. We also changed the legislature in South Dakota where it was more favorable. First year that we went in, I write 23 bills, 1 made it through, and that was the ban on Zuckerbucks. That was it. Next year, I write another 30 bills, I get 4 of them signed. Then another year, I write 99 bills, get 16 across the finish line. So for a state that says we are the gold standard, why are we passing so many bills? Because there was so much wrong, that's why. And there's still a lot to do. Some of you may have to run in leadership positions, whether it's at the city, the school, county, or even the legislature. We went in last year working with the Freedom Caucus. Actually, I should back up. 2 years ago, I sat down with the Freedom Caucus and other like-minded organizers and said, since our voter rolls are so expensive, here's what I'm going to do. We're going to create an unaffiliated group called Unite Behind the Platform, party principles of the party. Since you're a pro-life group and you focus on that, you are a jobs group and you focus on that, you are a property rights group and you focus on that, and you recruit candidates as the Freedom Caucus and you're the Liberty Tree Caucus, I'll buy the voter rolls, analyze all the data and give you the data, save you $8,000 a year, and I just need all of us to meet once a quarter to push our candidates through. We unseated 12 incumbents in the primary and then 8 more in the general election. And now we are 2 votes away from controlling the entire House with our freshman candidates. And we have 1/3 of the Senate with our freshman candidates. This unseasoned crew passed more legislation as freshmen than any other previous freshmen combined. We also saved property rights in South Dakota. Now, the leader of part of this movement, John Hanson, is now stepping up to run for governor. So when people ask me at dinner tonight, do you think Minnesota's lost? Do you think we have a chance? I'm an optimist. Yes, I believe Minnesota has a chance because there's no way the voters of Minnesota voted for this stuff. They don't know what's actually happening out there. They don't have somebody that's a lightning bolt character that they can believe in and follow. It is up to you to evaluate these candidates, help these candidates to connect with voters.
It goes beyond that. It goes
It
to
does.
the media. And out in the
Yep.
Dakotas, you've got media that is much less biased than here. Here,
Not really.
Well-
our media is really biased too. Like,
But
yeah, I'm a Nazi conspiracy theorist, is what the media has labeled me out there, and they actually use my picture for articles that I have nothing to do with. For example, there was legislation about attacking election officials. They used my picture testimony at the State Board of Elections that did not discuss that at all, and made me the villain, that somehow I'm attacking election officials. When during that meeting, you can actually look at it and listen to it, where I'm actually requesting better training for our election officials and a standard guidance to help them do logic and accuracy tests. Doesn't sound violent to me. I'm not even asking for penalties at that point. So, and Jessica Palmea is a conspiracy theorist. And somehow we have unfounded accusations regarding the 2020 election. Well, I'll tell you, in Minnesota's case, they didn't follow the law in the 2020 election. And that evidence I found out 25 days after the election, 5 days after they certified the election. In Minnesota statutes, when they receive an absentee ballot, they must immediately enter it into the statewide voter registration system. That data that I presented to the attorneys, 720,000 absentee ballots weren't connected to a voter. That violated the law. And the foolhardy part of this is they have all this iPads and all this technology and they still can't get it done. They're buying all this technology and not updating the laws to shorten the time for the date of completion. It's willful negligence.
Just a little FYI, we actually contested the election. We went down to the certification meeting, and they didn't let us speak. We had a document that we prepared with all the statutes they broke. We ended up getting a reply back from the county auditor, I guess, saying that basically they didn't have to follow any Minnesota election law for absentee ballot periods. That all the law only applies to election day, and that for the time period before, it doesn't really matter.
Oh, that's actually incorrect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll share with you the screen.
Yeah, please do. Yeah, there's a whole separate chapter for absentee balloting, and then there's the ever-encompassing election laws that apply over the entire period. And then they are right that there are specific election day precinct laws for the conduct there. And so I think that's a overgeneralization on their part and a misstatement and just willful negligence, as you're pointing out. That's just absolutely misleading.
Well, we weren't attorneys.
Yeah, and neither am I. But let me give you, if Susan was here tonight, I would always ask her this question. Minnesota laws are written in plain language, which means you don't have to be an attorney to understand the law. And so as you read it is how it's supposed to be interpreted. Now, of course, if somebody else disagrees with you, that's where you go to court and the judge basically kind of settles that. It's kind of the general premise. And so that's where I want to make sure that you guys have confidence in everything that you do. And part of that is why I created uscase.org. It's a nonprofit organization that has election research, hand count processes, security reviews, and test decks out there. And so early on, you can talk to Eric Van Mechelen, back in 2021 when I sat down with him in the base, or actually the lobby of Dakota County after having a meeting. I was just like, we've got to change this. And we need experts out there to come forward, especially in the computer industry, to basically say, this is not how this is supposed to work. You shouldn't have antivirus that is a year old, 2 years old, 5 years old. That's negligent.
Well, it's really simple, and it's called calling on regulatory compliance.
Right.
Governance, and that's every industry.
Yep.
Is utilizing that to stay where they need to be staying. So the fact that the state is not properly using that is something that's worse than suspect.
Right, and what's really ridiculous is when we've had Secretary of States and auditors ask for engineering change orders, the responses that we get back from ES&S is, well, your systems are connected to the internet, so you don't need those updates. We have that in writing.
What? Yes.
Exactly, yep.
Is the hand count or manual count, is that the end goal here?
Not necessarily. And so I'm glad you asked that question. When I started this investigation, I was hoping that the election systems could be secured. I was working with the Wyoming Secretary of State, working with Leah Anderson, actually filed complaints to the Secretary of State of South Dakota and the State Board of Elections, and implored them to ask for an engineering change order. The response that I got from the Secretary of State of South Dakota was, we don't have the authority to even ask that. That was disgusting. That's in writing. You can see that at the Secretary of State's State Board of Elections. I then also asked Wyoming to do it. They asked, and that's where we get the letter. We don't need to do any updates because it's not connected to the internet. I then asked Leah Anderson of South Dakota to ask that same letter. She gets the same response back. I asked the AG and SOS of Texas, Missouri. Then I asked Wisconsin. Then I asked Pennsylvania, South Carolina, North Carolina. Same responses from ES&S. So then I wrote a letter to the EAC asking, why aren't you requiring this and enforcing this part of it? Because we don't have regulatory authority to tell the vendors what to do. The only authority that they have is to basically fund or defund a state in their applications for the security grant or the HAVA dollars.
This sounds like something that needs to be addressed if it needs to be in an EO.
Right, and so this is where I'm kind of hopeful that as DOJ goes through and investigates this, they're going to see this and just go, holy cow. Like some of the findings that we're seeing from the Social Security Administration where they have 55 different systems that aren't even talking to each other, that's eye-opening, you know, to see stuff like that. So it's like, yeah, wait till you see our elections. Wait till you see some of what's going on in the states regarding the 1993 motor voter bill and how voter registrations are happening. You've got some states connected to ERIC, other states that aren't. States that are sharing voter rolls, states that aren't. You know, so, and then when we get to the voting systems back again, it's this potpourri that's out there. Texas and California, or how about this one? California and Colorado share their election manuals online. You can go to the Secretary of State's office and download the ES&S and Dominion manuals. But in Minnesota, they won't disclose it to you. South Dakota won't disclose it to you. Wisconsin, you can go download the cast vote records from 15 of the counties. Minnesota says they don't exist and you can't have them. South Dakota the same way. As a matter of fact, South Dakota, that Secretary of State, she turned off the saved ballot images and ordered ES&S to turn them off. That's how bad this is. It's the Wild West out there. It's not good. So if we can't fix it, then yes, the end goal is to hand count. We demand transparency. If we can see that you can conduct the logic and accuracy test, secure the elections, give us the cast vote records so that we can understand whether or not folds from an absentee ballot are creating votes out there in the ether that we're unaware of or canceling people's votes. I studied Dodge County, Wisconsin's ballots, and here I had to call a couple of the people who were elected to office and actually showed them the cast vote records and said, you know this fold here? You actually got more votes than you knew. It was canceling out these votes as overvotes. Another candidate, I had to go and say, it's too late to contest your election, but you actually won this election. The folds cast ballots for the other candidate that the voters didn't even select.
See, the principle of the cast votes should be standard across the board. And the other thing is the standard review of these cast votes.
Right.
Should be mandatory.
They should be. And I'm in a state where only 4 counties even have the laptop to look at the cast vote records. The other 62 counties don't even have the laptop to review the cast vote records. That's how bad this is across the United States.
In Minnesota, we're disenfranchised because we don't even have access to the cast vote records.
Correct.
Nobody does.
Correct.
Well,
right.
Only
the election official, if they so choose to look.
Only the election officials and the people of certain parties.
Your city clerks don't have access.
And the observers, or just...
Well, on observers, you look at the number of observers, and here's another thing.
Yeah.
An issue that comes up with these voting machines is the preservation of your digital evidence.
Right.
And I have seen some reports that came through unofficially from certain cybercrime areas talking about the fact that election observers and various local officials do not know about preserving digital digital evidence properly. I mean,
And he's correct by that.
If you connect a device, for example, a mobile phones, for 20 years now, they've had devices where law enforcement will take a phone from a perpetrator and put it in a bag, so to speak, and keep it, because the one thing that will happen is that if it reattaches to a network, the data state will change.
Right.
You need to preserve the data state.
Now, here's the thing, and what he's pointing to is U.S. Code 52, Section 20701. That is the federal requirement of 22 months of records retention from an election. And it's all records. Oh yeah, cast vote records. It's a record, it's in the name. Right? So that's one of them. All the log files, everything to test, to build the election, all of that is supposed to be saved. And we find that states aren't doing this. And I'm involved in a case where the admissions are incredible. I can't wait until it becomes public record. Once you read that case and the admissions, you will have a different view of this. We should be creating elections that we can hand a manual to anybody off the street, because we're voting for these people right off the street. That's the caliber of people that we are electing as auditors, as clerks that are running these elections. They don't know how to secure the systems. They barely know how to do a test deck. The fact that 23 out of 23 counties in Wyoming failed, and so far I've yet to have a single election official in Minnesota pass the logic and accuracy testing and instructions from ES&S is stunning. The fact that they don't even pass the recommendations of the EAC and the election management guidelines that are publicly available is stunning. This has been happening since 2005, and we're no better. This Help America Vote Act has been an absolute failure. It's created distrust. It's created all of these issues that we should walk away from. So also at uscase.org, we published a white paper. Hava Loudon, we're Hava compliant because she approved. It's in the name, Hava. She's from Ohio. Laura Shar from South Carolina. And then Beth Beazle from Texas, and then myself representing Minnesota and South Dakota. We got together, worked on this for over a year, and created the election gold standard. We've been using this to hand to legislators as we talk about election bills. And what was great is that when Larry Roden, our new governor in South Dakota, signed the 5 bills, I didn't plan this, but I looked at page 30, and I congratulated him for taking care of items 1 through 5. We didn't plan it, but he took care of the federal ballot, voter registration, free voter rolls, all of that kind of stuff. So that was the other piece of legislation, is that instead of getting charged $2,500 for the voter roll subscription and then $250 for each subsequent within a year, I asked for it to be free. The Senate adjusted it to $250, but they didn't read the other paragraph that I put in there, which is every week they have to put the history up of the voter rolls for free. So if you want the voter rolls this week, it's $250. But if you want to download the one from last week, it's free. So believe me, no single raindrop believes it's responsible for the flood. And this has been such a joyride to come and speak to you guys, to be part of Dinesh D'Souza's movie Vindicating Trump, to hack a laptop in front of my county commissioners. Let me tell you, last January, I had a lot of doubt. I had kidney stones while going with my wife and son to go see a national championship game for the South Dakota Jackrabbits football team in Texas. I was suffering in the hotel room trying to pass kidney stones, thinking I need to give up on this election integrity stuff because this is putting too much stress on me. Little did I know that God had a different plan for me, and it has been a roller coaster because I'm still thinking back like, okay, so I bought 5,000 more ballots, I hacked a laptop in front of my county commissioners, I bought more election equipment, bought more laptops, got into a movie with Vindicating Trump, and that was filmed in June, ran for a primary election against the leading Senate member in our chambers, Of course, I knew I was going to lose, but I drew down $100,000 from his campaign and associated PACs that it helped a bunch of our Freedom Caucus candidates cross the finish line and into the seats. Then, the investigations that we did, this gold standard white paper, to be involved in so many cases across the United States. As I talked to Jessica, I'm like, you are the most qualified person. I'm here to help you as well. Why would we ever give up? Same for you in this room that have heard this message. Why would you ever give up knowing the information that you have and the opportunity to create the discussion to prevent this dystopia from continuing going down the road? Now, I know we're running out of time, but here's the, in front of you, you'll have this tally sheet that we developed at uscase.org. I'm not saying it's the only hand count method. Linda Rance from Cause of America has a method. Clint Curtis out of Texas has a method. There's a Texas 65 method. What I want you to come away with is that there are a lot of methods out there. And what we did at US Case is we put our Excel documents out there for public use so that you can take it to the next level. What's been incredible is that the team in Wyoming who I trained has been training other people throughout the state, and they actually got an audience with the Secretary of State and showed him the hand count method that they took to the next level, and he liked it. Even his deputy attended one of my seminars. He liked it as well. Even some of the county clerks had to use it in a recount situation. And so the way that this works is that you have a team of 4 people at a table, 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans, sitting on opposite sides, so that the 1 Republican and the 1 Democrat on one side are reviewing the ballots. They determine who's going to call out, and the 1 Democrat and the 1 Republican on the other side have a tally sheet. They first break up the ballots into stacks of either 25 or 50. The table decides. You count out the first ballots using the blue pen, and if the numbers match between the 2 tally sheets, then you go to the red pen and do the next 25. If you make a mistake, if you look at the bottom of the sheet, you start out with a slash, but if you need to go back and recount on the red, you now do an X. If you have to do another recount, you fill it in. And you don't have to sit there and count the number of slashes because you just look at the last number and it's already done for you. Okay? There's videos online at US Case. You guys should practice this and actually do it. We have another update that we're doing, which is we are doing the Pick 2 and Pick 3 races, which are typical of city and also school board races, so that you'll be able to see how those work. We're going to be displaying that for some of you that are coming down to Texas. We're actually going to have all of the different hand count methods deal with a Pick 3 race with 6 candidates and 3 write-ins. So you'll actually see how the different systems work with that. And what's interesting is that this one is kind of based on a lot of the Minnesota rules and statutes, so that it's basically ready to go in Minnesota. There's been some arguments like, well, you have to put them in stacks of 25. It says may, it doesn't say shall. So the interesting thing about Minnesota statutes is that when it says must and shall, you kind of have to do that. You're required. When it says may, that's optional. You can ignore it. You have the flexibility. And so we're going to see more hand counting stressed over the next year, especially with this executive order. And I think states should be putting in the hand count method in their statutes anyways, because I don't know about you guys, but I remember the 1991 Halloween storm, and it kind of took out power, and so we had to do things by hand. So this is just a good disaster recovery plan that we should just be ready to go at all times.
Business continuity and disaster recovery.
That's right. And so, and this is something that I believe that parties should be doing to train their election judges, to train them what to look for on ballots. Are both the judges' signatures there? Is the proper absentee information there? What about voter intent? You know, all of those types of things, especially during recounts. Making sure that we're training up our people to represent our candidates, to protect our party's votes out there. It also protects the other party too, at the same time, by raising the bar. All right, so I know it's past 8 o'clock. I think we have to kind of wrap up here soon.
Want to take a couple more questions and then we can kind of
Yep.
do final announcements?
Yep. Yep.
Then we can-
So I've got a donation bucket up here. Please donate. If you want to write out a check, you can write out a check to the corporation, which is Midwest Swamp Watch. I don't have to report publicly. If you donate to uscase.org, that gets reported publicly and shared out there, and that is a tax donation. And that helps with equipment purchases, hand count studies, the research that we do, also database work that we do on that side as well. Okay, any other questions?
What if we do go to the commissioners? What if we do bring this up to the election clerk and the commissioners? To no avail.
Yep.
They listen to you, don't respond to you, or they blatantly lie to you over and over and over again. What can we do at this point?
Run for office. The best threat is competition. Run for office. It really is. So sometimes it's easier to take away their vote.
So in these bills that you're writing, are you putting in explicitly that voters have standing as injured party?
In some of them, yes. And so I actually did write 2 bills for Minnesota to kind of sneak in. And one of them is an adjustment of the timeline for when we can contest an election. Because right now, we have anywhere from 7 to 10 days after an election to contest an election. But yet the county officials have 45 days after an election to enter in all the voter information. I tried to shove that after that.
Well, if you don't have the CDR, then you can't say whether it's contested.
Correct. However, if you have a bad test deck, you can throw salt on them to say you didn't properly test the equipment, and based upon the invalid test, we should review all of the ballots. And I think that's another touching point that we're going to have to force upon them.
This is just a comment. That you read the plain language of the statute, but you have to realize that that is not what the Secretary of State and other offices are going by. They can write their own rules as addendums that change what's in the statute. So it doesn't fly to say you're not going by the statute because they have altered it elsewhere.
And that's true. You have to double check the administrative rules to make sure that there's not something there that circumvents the law. There are conflicts in the law versus the statute, especially in regards to absentee voting. So in the statutes, it's very clear that there's supposed to be no tabulation before the polls close. But yet, another statute that just passed last year allows them to insert the ballots now 19 days before the election into ballot boxes. Doesn't say tabulators. There's a very distinct, but the county election officials are putting them into the tabulators. And so that will be another challenge that will be coming up. Okay, anyone else? And thank you for the picture. Great way to lead out today.
Well, I guess I can just say thank you so much for coming.
You bet.
This has been fabulous. And as you can tell by having so many people come out to listen to this, we are all interested. And hopefully we can have some more opportunities coming up at ST50 to talk about this in detail, perhaps some training on how to be a poll watcher.
Yep.